former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. He is in Istanbul. Always good to talk to you, James.
Great to be with you, Michelle. Thank you.
All right, so what we have heard is a lot of optimism from Finland, from the NATO chief, on the fact that they believe that Sweden, as one put it, is just a matter of time before Sweden is also able to join NATO. You don't always hear anything close to that level of optimism from the Turkish side, however. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think eventually Sweden is, of course, going to get into NATO. I mean, Turkey's strategic thinkers understand how valuable Sweden will be as an ally. But I think the Turkish government is, of course, serious and sincere in their deep distaste for, well, the realities of Swedish politics. Sweden has been a place where dissidents or even people viewed as terrorists in one country often find refuge. And it's to a certain extent, the Swedish political situation seems like an immovable object. But I think they will find a compromise over time. And by the way, it is a big step for Finland to move first before Sweden comes together to NATO. If you look back to Finnish history, when Finland gained its independence from the Russian Empire, by the way, at the beginning of the 20th century, its main security goal was to form a military cooperation pact with Sweden. And then the Soviets invaded and put that on hold for a while.
Thanks for that little lesson there, Matthew. Appreciate that. Oh, no, always good to get more information. Okay, so when you look at these people and incidents that have happened in Sweden, for example, certain people that Turkey believes belong to organizations that Turkey sees as terrorist groups. Let's say that they are there, they're able to spread their message around, they're able to occasionally hold a demonstration. How much of a threat do they actually pose to Turkey from Sweden?
Yeah, probably not much of an operational threat. They are, however, useful for the PKK, for FETÖ in fundraising. But Sweden is not going to be a platform from which either of these groups or any terrorist groups would attack Turkey in the homeland. I mean, there's plenty of space in Syria for that, northern Syria, in Iraq in the past, and inside Turkey itself, unfortunately, right now. But politically, it's understandable that if a country that recognizes one of these groups itself as a terrorist group, in the PKK, as an EU member state, Sweden does recognize the PKK as a terrorist state, and yet it allows PKK members or members of other terrorist groups simply to live peacefully and in a healthy, safe way. That is politically serious misalignment with Turkey, but not only with Turkey, with all of NATO's own terrorist policies, which are that you don't cooperate with one terrorist group against another. So it's a serious political insult to Turkey. But again, I think they're going to find a compromise.
Okay, so some of these people in question there in Sweden, let's say they call themselves journalists. Turkey might see it a different way, saying that they're actually fundraising, for example. Sweden is not going to be willing to, say, make arrests and extradite them to Turkey. Would you say that something like that would be out of the question? So where would the compromise be? Will Sweden be investigating some of these people and organizations more deeply?
I think it's probably along those lines, Michelle. I mean, I completely agree that, Sweden has said, its government has said, we as a government have no legal mechanism to extradite anybody. Our courts do that, and they are independent, and the Swedish courts really are independent. So for there to be an extradition, the courts in Sweden will have to be persuaded. So as you say, then there'll have to be more serious investigations. So the Swedish national law enforcement agencies under the Swedish government can, of course, conduct such investigations. And then depending upon where the investigation leads, perhaps there could be extraditions. But there is a strong chance that under Swedish law, as you said, somebody who claims to be a journalist, even if they are fundraising for the PKK, may be able to argue successfully in a Swedish court that they're not terrorists. So it'll take a little while, I think, for these issues to be worked through. But the compromise is probably serious investigations by the Swedish government.
Got it. So now that we expect this announcement today that Finland, there's no other obstacles or objections on the Turkish side, at least. How long do we expect it to take before Finland is actually a full-fledged member of NATO?
Oh, it can be quite quick. I mean, after the Grand National Assembly votes to ratify Finland's accession, Then the Hungarian parliament needs to. That seems to be an imminent step. And then, the Finnish government has to declare, okay, we're in, and that's it. It's done. So it can be quite quick. Finland has been cooperating, as Sweden has, for decades with NATO, and they are considered two of the best NATO partners. So two of the strongest, most active cooperators with NATO that are not yet member states. Finland has a capable, big military with a lot of US F-15 fighter jets, with an enormous amount of artillery deployed facing Russia to defend Finland. So its military forces are, to a certain extent, integrated into a lot of NATO planning already. So the process should be quick.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, Russia said that it most was opposed to a larger NATO on its borders, and this is what it gets, a larger NATO at its borders. All right, Matthew, great to talk to you as always.
Thanks, Michelle. It was an honor.